Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Park. I'm a librarian with LA County Library, and I welcome you all to Work Ready, How to Succeed at Your New Job. Now, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Work Ready. Work Ready is a program whose purpose is to help LA County residents get a new job or improve their current work situation. We're doing that in three ways. One, we're lending out laptops and Wi-Fi hotspots out of 20 library locations for a 6-week checkout period. Two, we're producing events just like this one about all sorts of work-related topics from basics like resumes, interviews, and cover letters, which you have coming up later this month, to deeper dives into nonprofits and entrepreneurship. And the third way Work Ready helps job seekers is by purchasing the latest and greatest work-related books, ebooks, audiobooks, DVDs, and more. Information about Work Ready and all of our services is available at our website, lacountylibrary.org. And with that, I would like to introduce our presenter, Oleg Kagan. Oleg is the Community Engagement Coordinator at LA County Library and the host and presenter of many of our Work Ready virtual programs. Welcome, Oleg. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for the introduction. And I'm happy to be here to present this program, which I think is a pertinent and exciting topic, and one we haven't talked about yet during Work Ready. Work Ready has been running for the last 2 years, so I've seen a whole bunch of presentations about different topics, and I wanted to address this one, how to start at a new job. So I'm going to bring up my PowerPoint and then we will get into it. Now, this program it almost seems from some of the feedback I've gotten that people think that it's for people who are just starting out in the workforce. And that's actually not the case at all. We're talking today about how to succeed at your new job. And so this program is applicable whether you are starting a very first entry-level job at Arby's, or if you're a mid-career professional starting in a new organization, and the plethora of possibilities in between. Now, there are a few situations where some of the tips in this presentation may not apply. If you're a Fortune 500 CEO starting out at a giant organization, perhaps what I'm going to be talking about today is not going to be extremely relevant, although I think some of the stuff is. Or if you're going to be in an industry that has a very specific type of work culture, it's extremely political, and if you're nice to anybody, then it's not going to work out. Then it's not going to apply to you. But for everybody else, how to succeed at your new job will give you some tips about how to do well in the very beginning of your workplace journey. The description of the program today is pertinent. You're going to be learning soft skills. And for those who don't know what soft skills tend to be put in opposition to hard skills, whereas hard skills tend to be technical skills or capacities where you have a very specific kind of way to do it. So you have, for instance, computer programming, where you're working in a programming language. There isn't a whole lot of give in terms of what the language is able to do. If you're flying a plane, you have the way to fly a plane. There's steps, and of course you use your professional judgment. But when you're flying a plane, consider that a hard skill, where soft skills like customer service, different kinds of communication have a lot more give. And so that's, people call them soft skills. What we're going to be talking about today is a practical approach to applied soft skills when it comes to coming into a workplace. And why is this important? Of course, if you're here, you have some sense of that. But I would like to say that we spend a lot of time at work. When you're starting at a place that you're going to be spending a lot of time, it's pretty important that you start off your tenure in the right way. Because starting off in the right way could lead to future opportunities. I'm talking about being assigned special projects. I'm talking about potential promotions, raises. I'm talking about the opportunity to get training that could expand and launch your career in different directions. And of course, maybe people aren't thinking about this too much when you're starting at a new place, but when you're ready to move on, who's a better reference for you than your current supervisor, your colleagues? And in fact, sometimes colleagues at one place will move to another place and help you get a job somewhere else. This is normal in the work world. And when you make a great first impression, you're setting the scene for the possibility of future career success as well. But say you've gotten a new job, and I want to say, congratulations. You've gotten your work documents in order, your resume, your cover letter. They've gotten you into an interview. You've done your research. You've practiced. You got in there and you demonstrated, or you've talked about your skills in an effective way. You've convinced them that you are qualified, that you're the right person for the job. And they decided to give you an offer because now they need you. They want you to come and help their organization. And yet, there are people out there, you might be among them, who feel like the person in this picture. This should be a time of celebration, and you feel like a thief, a burglar, like an imposter. Imposter syndrome is big for a lot of people, where you feel like you don't deserve to be in this new job, where you're not the right person for this role, and they just haven't figured out their mistake yet. And to that, I say no. To that, I say that you've gone through your work documents, you've gone through this potentially laborious job search process. You've done a negotiation, perhaps. Maybe even if your job search was easy, maybe if your interview was a snap, maybe if they offered you way more than you were expecting, it doesn't matter. You should feel like the sunglasses pineapple in this picture, and you should celebrate the fact that you were offered a job, potentially, I hope, a job that you wanted, and not worry too much about feeling like an imposter. But once you're done celebrating your new job, it's time then to move on to the job. We're going to be talking about some tips for starting out. And then I'm going to focus specifically on working with a new boss, interacting with new colleagues, and thinking about the company as a whole when you're just starting out. And I mean your first day, and maybe the first few weeks even. So let's get right into it. Now, imagine waking up on the first day of your new job. You're probably a little bit nervous, and that's normal. For most people who are starting in a new place, there's going to be some things that are unfamiliar. Even if you know very well how to do the job that you've been hired for, it's still a new company, a new place with new people, a new boss, all sorts of ambiguity, things you don't know. So I just want to let you know that it's fine in that situation to be nervous. It's almost just like in a job interview, expected. And because you're anxious and a little bit nervous, preparation is key. And one of the things to do in that situation is to give yourself time, especially on the first day. If you think about it, particularly if you have only been to an office once or maybe twice, you're not sure where to park. You might not be able to find the office that you're starting at if it's a big building. So you want to get to the office on your first day. You want to get to the location with enough time to be able to sort out parking issues. You want to give yourself enough time to avoid any traffic snafus that might happen. We live in the greater LA area, so we know that anything could happen at any time. But we want to give ourselves the best possible start at a place. So give yourself more time than you think you might need. And if you have to sit in the parking lot in your car when you get there, that's okay. Give you time to do some breathing exercises. calm yourself down. Naturally, you may have asked at the interview or following the interview what the dress code is for the company, or you may have seen when you went to do your interview how people are dressed. Naturally, it's important to dress for success when you're starting out. And I would recommend, if you're not quite sure how people dress at this organization, go for a more formal approach, just like you would do at an interview. Because let's face it, it's a lot easier to dress down when you're dressed up. Any man could take off a tie, it's not a big deal. But if you come into an organization assuming that they're a lot more informal than they are, then it's a lot harder to then dress that up. And then in the vein of preparation, you're going to be introducing yourself a whole lot on your first day, and not just your name. You're going to have essentially similar conversations with a bunch of different coworkers, perhaps your boss, and that's going to include things like, where have you worked in the past? Oh, it didn't work out. What happened there? Oh, maybe what your hobbies and interests are. For people who are already a little bit anxious, I would say this is in a way to think about like an elevator intro. So you have like 30 seconds to introduce yourself. And the best way to do that well is to prepare in advance. I mean, you know who you are and you know what you're comfortable in sharing about yourself. So take some time before you get to your new workplace and think about how you'd like to introduce yourself. For instance, if you had a difficulty at your previous workplace, if you left on maybe not the best of terms, how do you want to describe that? You don't want to be stuck in a situation with a new colleague and having to go, wait, like, do I want to tell them about all that stuff that happened? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. It's entirely up to you. I would keep it, maybe don't tell them everything right away, but practice introducing yourself and talking about your previous work experiences. And then once you're done with that, listen and observe. You're in a new place. You're going to experience a different work culture, maybe than your previous workplace. So listen and observe, see how people do things, see how people interact, see who's friends with who. And of course, since you're new at a place, you may not know everything. So ask questions. It's pretty important. I had a colleague share a story with me when I told them about this presentation. They said they were at a workplace in the past where they had a few new people start, and the new people were talked a lot amongst themselves. They were friendly and everything. And when they were given assignments, they just set out to do it. And when they were finished with the assignment, it turned out that they did a whole bunch of stuff in a way that was not acceptable for that organization. They made a huge faux pas. The other colleagues in that group were saying, well, if they only would have asked us how we do that. I wish they would have asked. It would have made it a lot easier for everybody. Asking questions is expected of somebody who's starting at a new place. And so make great use of that and ask questions. And the person you're probably going to be asking the most questions to is your boss, your supervisor, maybe multiple bosses. And so what you want to do at the very beginning is to start taking note of their style. I don't mean their clothing style. I mean, are they a person who likes to be very in control of what their staff does? Are they micromanagers? Now that could be good, that could be bad. Are they very laid back? Do they want you they give you an assignment, you go do the thing, and if you have a question, you come and ask them. But otherwise, you kind of work on your own. Everybody has a different way of approaching that. Me, for example, I'm a little bit more laid back. I like my staff to do their thing, and if they have questions, they can ask me, and I'll give them feedback. But I don't want to be involved in every single part of what they do. But there's some people who like to be really in control, and that's fine. On your first day, you want to just take note of that and put that in the back of your mind for the future. Of course, you also want to note their communication preferences. Do they prefer that you come into their office to ask them questions? Do they prefer chatting through instant message? Do they prefer emails? Do they prefer you ask them questions certain times of the day? Do they prefer that you approach your colleagues instead of them to ask questions about certain projects? And this is something that oftentimes people will tell you. But if they don't, you can also ask, do you want me to, if I have a question about this, do you want me to come and ask you? Should I just knock on your door? When you're starting out, it shows that you are interested in what other people like, what other people's preferences are. And it makes you appear caring, and that's what you want. Speaking of caring, you also want to take note of what your supervisor cares about. There are some things that are more important to them in the workplace and some things that are less important to them. So maybe they want a certain report every Friday at 4 o'clock, and they really, really don't like if that report is late. That's something to take note of. I left a workplace a while ago at the same time as my supervisor had left. And before I left, our workplace was pretty relaxed. I mean, if you get there 5 minutes late, nobody cared. After I and the supervisor left, my colleagues reported to me that the new supervisor had apparently been former military, and he was really strict about time. He cared a lot about whether people showed up exactly on time or even early, that people's breaks were exactly to the minute. So it depends. Different supervisors have different things that they care about. Now, you also want to learn about the formal hierarchy, which is like a regular organizational chart available at most organizations. Even if an organization is relatively flat, there are still people who report to other people. Some people are in charge of different projects. You want to kind of start to get a sense of that, but you also want to get a sense of that all important informal hierarchy. And I know that for the folks who have worked in offices before, you know all about this. And by informal hierarchy, I mean it's that thing where the long-standing administrative assistant is really more important than the CEO, because she knows the processes of how to get everything done. She knows the various people in the different departments. And so if you need to actually get something done, you talk to her first and she'll take care of you. And it's the same when certain projects are overseen by people who may not be senior or in the organization, but they know everything about this project. They're the ones who are in charge of this function. And so you want to definitely be aware of them and definitely, you know, take note of that informal hierarchy. And of course, you have to remain open, because when you're just starting out, you're not seeing everything. People will tell you that they like things a certain way, but once you've been there for a few weeks, you'll realize that maybe they actually don't like it that way. Maybe they like it a different way, or maybe once they've sort of gotten to know you and relaxed a little bit, maybe at that point, they'll change the way that they interact with you. And so what you see on your first day may not end up being what you see a year from your first day. And that's fine. That's something you should be expecting with both your boss and with your colleagues. And colleagues are people you're going to be interacting with probably about as much or maybe more than your boss, depending on the organization that you're working for. Now, the essential, especially important thing when you're just starting out is to read the mood of the room. What I mean is you might come into a new organization on your first day and you're excited, get ready to get going, bushy-tailed, you just want to, roar into your new job, and you look around and the mood is really depressed. The people are kind of just in head down doing their own thing. Maybe the lady in the corner, she's giving you the stink eye. What did you do? Nothing. This may have nothing to do with you, but it may affect how you should be acting with these people. For instance, maybe the person that was in that place before you in your job may have been, I don't know, the office mom. Maybe she had been there for a long time. Maybe she was really caring and really supportive of everybody in the organization. And then maybe something happened to her. Or maybe she's retired. And everybody's a little bit depressed because they really loved her and now she's gone. And you're this new person. You're never going to replace that person. That's not your fault. But maybe you adjust your mood based on how everybody else is feeling. And while you should stay kind, you might not be, as excitable because it comes across as cloying to the people who just lost a valued coworker. Now, on the other side of that, you get into some workplaces and immediately people start sidling up to you and taking you to lunch and everything. And there, I would also put on the brakes a little bit. Don't get too chummy with people because you don't know what the politics look like in the office. And sometimes people will tell you things on your first day and you'll realize, oh, actually, after a while, that's not the case. And so, somebody takes you to lunch and then it starts dishing about this person likes this person likes this, hold on. You say, okay, you take that in, and then you start to make your own determinations, decide, you observe, you see what people are actually experiencing, what you actually see happening in the organization. And of course, in the same vein, you want to be careful about discussing the topics that tend not to be going over best at places like cocktail parties or workplaces. And avoid discussing religion. You want to avoid discussing politics. It's election day, so vote, but don't tell people who you voted for. Even if they ask you at your new workplace, that's either never or later when you get to know people a little bit more. In the beginning, that stuff can only cause division. Speaking of division, drama. There's always people in a workplace who want to start drama. They don't like this person. They don't like that person. This person looked at them wrong. You're new. Don't get involved in that. Just smile and nod when that person gets a hold of you and make your exit as quickly as possible to safer harbors where people are less dramatic. And say getting involved in drama really early is actually getting involved in drama anytime, but especially really early is a bad way to make a first impression with somebody. Now, you also want to know your boundaries, and I talked a little bit about this in a previous slide when I talked about the elevator intro, or you're practicing your introduction. Now, in some workplaces, they're a little bit more distant. In some workplaces, they're really informal. But you really have to understand and think about and reflect before you get to a new workplace what you're comfortable sharing. Some people really don't mind sharing about their family, what they do over the weekend, all their personal life is at the behest of their workplace colleagues. But there's some other people who aren't as comfortable with that. And where you are on the spectrum is something that you should decide. That may be you may seem a little bit aloof at first if you're not willingly sharing if everybody else is, but that's fine because you're starting in a new place and you obviously want to be, looked at positively there, but it's also you and you want to feel comfortable when you're there. And I would say if it's the right workplace and if the people are, looking at you in good faith, they'll respect your boundaries and, they won't push on you to share more than you're comfortable with. Now, the final thing I want to mention about working with your colleagues is, especially in the beginning, start learning other people's jobs. I don't mean learning exactly what they do so you can replace them. I mean learning what their responsibilities are, learning what they're responsible for in terms of work assignments, what projects they head, what kind of work they do, what functions they carry out in an organization. Because if you're going to be working among them and you're going to at some point need help from John, who is the guru of project X, or somebody in the IT department, you want to see, especially your closest colleagues, what kind of stuff they do and how they prefer their work life. If they prefer to be asked to do a certain thing at a certain time, you want to get to know that. And even, I would say, write it down. I had another colleague when we were talking about this presentation. She said that she used to actually have a notebook where when she would meet somebody at a new workplace, she would write it down, who their name, some characteristics of them, some facts about them, what they do. Because if there's a lot of colleagues, if it's a big organization and it's your first day where things are really, really overwhelming, it's easy to forget. Everybody tells you their name, and all of a sudden, 2 minutes later, you're looking at the 5 people around you. You have no idea what anybody said. So you may have to ask people's names again, and that's fine. And then, when you have a chance, just settle, write them down, so that you remember. Then you go home, you study. It's all in the vein of preparation. Eventually, a year later, you'll be looking back, going, "How could I have not known all these people's names?" But in the beginning, a lot of information. So make it easy for yourself to remember it. So we talked about working with your boss. We talked about your colleagues. And now let's talk about the company as a whole. I was talking a moment ago about getting to know people's jobs, learning people's jobs. In any organization, you want to start from the beginning to find your people. And I mean the people that you click with in different parts of the organization. So you might be able to, find somebody in IT that you click with. I would say you start by being just kind to everybody. There's some people you get along, you're gonna just naturally get along with better. And you want to be able to identify those people and try to and make friends in different parts of the organization. It's going to take time. You're not going to do it in the first day, but you're going to just see, oh, this person, you talk to this person in IT and they were really friendly to you on the first day. So if you need something in IT again, you can call them and say, hey, you were really nice to me. I have this other question. You start developing relationships with people, and it's good, especially if you have projects that span an organization. Actually, I would say that this is sort of focusing on the office environment, but look, if you're working at a restaurant, you're also going to naturally get a chance to know everybody who works there, whether you're a server, you're a cook, any job that you have, you're going to need to know the different people. So you find your people in fiscal, in IT, in whatever other area of the organization there is, and you start to think about those people, maybe put them in your notebook so that when you do have questions about whatever their area of expertise is, you know who to ask. And then say, human resources is one of those departments where you want to know even more in depth who's in charge of what. For instance, if you plan to at some point go off on FMLA leave, I mean, many people don't plan for that. But, if you think that, you might be somebody or you might be pregnant at some point, then that's going to be the return to work person in HR is going to be really important to know about and be able to ask questions, because there's a lot of details involved in that sort of thing. When it comes to human resources too, you start and on your first day, you may be inundated with all sorts of paperwork. I think for some organizations, it's going to be a few days where you're going to be just sitting and signing papers and looking over things. And in that morass of papers, there's going to be information about your benefits. This is really important. And I don't know, I suppose people will tell you this, but many people just ignore this crazy amount of paperwork and don't get very deep into the details of their benefits. And that's a mistake. That you might want to take those papers home and read them carefully, see what the company is actually offering and know about it in depth, because there are a great many people who miss out on, for instance, a company match when it comes to their retirement, because they didn't look at the paperwork and they didn't make an account on the retirement, on the retirement website, and didn't see that, oh, you actually have to move the little slider over to adjust how much you're contributing so that the company will match what you're contributing to your retirement. That's not something that you want to miss. And same thing with, of course, healthcare, with any kind of insurance that you get through the company. You want to get to know those things. And if you're confused about what that stuff says, you can ask someone in HR. You can look up a lot of these terms online, because many, many companies have retirement and people write about retirement online. Or you can ask a financial advisor if you're working with one or not, or if you can ask somebody in your family that you trust. But getting to know what those benefits are in depth is going to be beneficial for you in the present and especially in the future. Now, sometimes you will start at a place and realize that it's a bad fit. And I've wrestled about this, whether to include this in this presentation, because it can be a real downer. I mean, like, look, you start at a new place you're happy about potentially just getting your dream job. And then you get there. And it turns out that the job ad or what they told you at the interview is completely different from what you're actually going to be doing. What do you do in that situation? Well, I suppose you wait and see if it's going to be like that. You ask, hey, listen, we talked with maybe in HR, when I was told that I'd be doing this, and now it seems like I'm going to be doing this and this and this. Maybe it's just your first days that are going to be like that, and maybe things will turn around. That's something that you have to decide when you're there, and when you go home and you think about it, you reflect, am I okay with this job that was in a way a bait and switch? Maybe the job that you're going to be doing is going to be fine. Or maybe you just really need a job and don't have much of a choice. That, of course, happens to a lot of people too. But you might find that the environment is toxic. You get there and the people are just mean, and it's not because their favorite coworker just left. It's just because that's the way the organization is. You don't want that. But again, you may not have a choice. Or you get there and, heaven forbid, illegal stuff is going on. Law breaking is happening and you see it on your first day. In those kind of situations, you have to end up deciding whether you're going to stay there or not. In general, what you see on your first day, though, may not be the perfect representation of what a company is. And so I would say, unless, you're getting crazy red flags happening, take your time, give it a week, give it a month, see if the job is what you think it is, see if the organization is what you think it is, and take the time to learn. It's been a regularly mentioned thing during this presentation, regularly mentioned piece of information that you need to observe. You need to sit back and look at what's happening around you. And it's hard to do that when you're just starting and there's a whole bunch of information. I was at a workplace once for 6 months before I realized that 2 people that I interacted with on a very regular basis completely hated each other. Of course, I didn't get involved, but sometimes it takes time for those kind of intrigues to be revealed to you. Anyhow, that's all about getting in with the company as a whole. And one thing I do want to talk about is the place of past experience when it comes to starting in a new organization. And then we're going to review and we'll be ready for our question and answer session. So if you have questions, by all means, place them in the chat and we'll be happy to cover questions that you are thinking about, you've thought about during the presentation, you've been holding on to even before the presentation. Just throw them in the Q&A and we'll have plenty of time to cover questions. But right now, let's talk about past experience. Maybe you are a person with 40 years of experience in a certain trade and you started a new organization. Or maybe you're a person who has never had a job before at all, or have no experience in a particular role and you're starting there too. Either way, it's important to be tactful about how you approach your past experience. If you've been somewhere for 40 years, obviously you have a lot of knowledge about, if it's been 40 years, indeed, you have a lot of knowledge how the industry has changed, but you have not a lot of knowledge about processes, procedures, about how to do different functions of the job. My advice is to wait when it comes to sharing that advice, unless you're specifically, explicitly asked. Because on your first days, you may not realize why this company does things a certain way. You may not know the history or of why they're approaching a certain process. And while it may be less efficient or effective, it may have ended up that way for reasons that are legitimate in logic of this organization. The other thing to consider is that once you've been somewhere for a while, if you followed all the tips in this presentation, then the people at that organization trust you. They know you, they feel like you have a certain amount of credibility that you've earned there. And at that point, they'll be a lot more open to hearing about your past experiences and what you want to change and what you feel is a more effective way to do X activity. And so your idea about changing something, or even saying that they're doing really great at it, will be a lot more acceptable to the people at the organization who may be afraid of change or may be resistant to change. It's not that much different if you're just starting. Obviously you might have questions about if you're starting in the workforce period. For me, it was at the library. For me, it was working as a Subway sandwich artist. I made beautiful sandwiches at that time. I still remember that was a fun job. You're starting out, you may not know a whole lot about professionalism. So in those situations, you use the experience that is sort of obvious. You show up on time, you show up dressed correctly, you try to ask questions and listen. You observe and you learn first. And then if you can, then you put your own quality on the job. You bring your personality into your work, which is not a bad thing to do in general, but you want to make sure you know how to do that in any given organization. All right. Now we've covered quite a lot of information. I feel like I've been talking pretty fast. So let's take a little bit of time to review the basics of what I've covered. Just mentioned it again in the previous slide. When it comes to having no experience in the workforce, everybody knows when you're starting out at a job and when you're doing a job, but when you're starting out in the workforce, these are the basics that you need. You arrive early, you dress appropriately. I'm dressed up for this presentation today because work ready. I'm ready for doing this presentation the first time. You listen and you ask questions. You take notes on the answers to those questions, because if you get a lot of information, it's hard to keep all that information in mind all at once. You take notes on people. You try to take in the information about this new organization and be humble about what you know and what you could learn. You stay away from that workforce drama. Now, I'm not saying that politics is bad in every situation. When it comes to politics, what is politics but getting things done through other people? The higher you get into an organization, the more difficult it is, I've read, to avoid politics, because everything you end up doing is politics. Now, that could mean intrigue, or that could mean just making arrangements and negotiations about resources with other people. And sometimes that's just working within the political frame. That's distinct from workplace drama, where people are getting up to things for no good reason and should probably stop. You want to notice people's preferences. Certain people like to work in certain ways. You want to keep an open mind about what they like to do, and try to work with their preferences as much as possible. And of course, you have preferences of your own, which people will ideally, in a good organization, also learn and take note of. And of course, stay positive. Maybe you are going to make a mistake on your first day, in your first week. It could be terrible, but keep in mind, you're just starting out. And so you very often have an excuse. I'm new. I didn't know. Okay. Maybe if you are a computer programmer and you flush all of the code, then that's going to be a bad thing. But if that company wasn't keeping backups, that's their fault. So if you make a mistake at a new job, it's like doing a presentation in public and tripping on the way up to the stage. Everybody has nightmares about this, but there are way worse things that can happen. When you think about it, you trip when you trip, you get up, you climb the stairs, you get up and you deliver that awesome presentation. And this is the same thing that you do in a new workplace. You make a mistake. You acknowledge your mistake, you learn from it, you keep going. A year from now, probably nobody will be thinking about that mistake. So stay positive. You might be anxious, but that's okay. That company wanted you. Let's think back to that sunglasses pineapple, the one I have at the bottom of the screen here, that you went through the interview process. They liked you. They wanted you. They felt that you had something to offer that organization, even if you feel inside like they must have made a mistake. Like you can't be the one. You are the one. So stay positive and enjoy those first few days, wide-eyed and innocent in a new place. And now let's go through some library resources that we have about starting out at a new place. We've got a whole bunch of books, ebooks, audiobooks about different work-related topics that Stephen mentioned earlier in his introduction. And I just want to let you know that we have specific books about how to start at your new job. One that's well known is The First 90 Days by Michael D. Watkins. You can get that as an ebook, an audiobook, a physical book, any way you want, other than perhaps being downloaded into your brain with no work on your part. You will have to work. You will have to actually experience the book. We have the Ex-Offenders New Job Finding and Survival Guide. We have Working World 101, the new grad's guide to getting a job. So if you are a new grad, if you're getting your very first job or you're just out of college, Working World 101 has a specific section on just starting out at that new job. And of course, there's much, much more available on hard skills and soft skills, including free classes. And we have LinkedIn Learning and Gale courses, both available for free for you, unlimited with your library card. In LinkedIn Learning, if you don't have your library card, is like 30 bucks a month. So you're saving a ton of money by using it with your library card. And both LinkedIn Learning and Gale courses have classes on soft skills, have classes on computer programming, photography, bookkeeping, almost anything that you can think of. And we have a lot more classes available at lacountylibrary.org/learn. I highly recommend going there and exploring what's available. And of course, we're going to be having more programming out there for you, both work-related and not. If you go to our website, lacountylibrary.org, on the top right-hand side, you can click events, and you'll find out about the virtual events that we have going on. And when it comes to Work Ready, we do have also at the end of this month a program about cover letters. People have asked, and I've seen your survey results, and a lot of people are interested in cover letters. We just did interviews recently. We've done resumes, and I suppose cover letters is the next thing that we should be covering. So if you're interested in cover letters, what place they have in the work environment today, then that will be the program for you. It's going to be at the end of this month. I believe it's going to be on Tuesday, the 29th, also at 11 o'clock. And I'll put everything in the follow-up email for this program. So if you missed any part of the program, if you want to review this program, session is being recorded. It'll be posted on our YouTube channel probably early next week, and I'll send a follow-up email with a video link as well as the slides of this presentation. So if you want to share them with anybody, by all means, I have no problem with you sharing these slides with anybody who you think might benefit from them. If you have questions about items in this presentation and beyond, you can get in touch with librarians and library staff by phone by calling your local library during their open hours. You can text the library via a number at lacountylibrary.org/contact us. You can go there and there's a number that you can text and you can get responses. You can email the library. There's a contact form on that website. And of course, you can also chat with instant librarians. If you go to that web page there, lacountylibrary.org/contact us, Monday through Friday, 12 to 6, you'll see a little chat box and you can chat with librarians and ask questions if you need to. And with that, I thank you very much for listening to this presentation, taking your time to be here. I hope it's been beneficial to you. And now I'm ready to answer your questions. Stephen, I think you're muted.
Thanks, Oleg. That was really great. We do have a few questions I'd love to share.
Sure.
But before we go, as someone who also started a new job, my current job about a month and a half ago, I really appreciate this presentation and the context. Let's see, got a job here. What advice do you have for someone starting a work from home job for the first time?
Oh, this is a great question and I specifically included some photos where people were working from home in the presentation because so many people have made this transition from working fully in an office for their whole careers to being completely remote. And I'm among them. I'm currently working 100% remotely, although I do go into libraries and into meetings and stuff. But so in terms of the starting at a new workplace, and Stephen might have something to add here once I'm done because he just did this. A lot of the advice is actually very similar. I would just say that it takes a little bit more time. Everything that I've talked about, everything that the relationships that you might build with individuals in a week or a month in an office environment where you're just you're walking around, you're seeing people, you might accidentally end up talking to somebody in IT because you went there for a different reason. All of those chance encounters aren't going to happen in a virtual environment. So some advice on making those kind of things happen, building closer relationships with your team, is to spend a little bit more time chatting with people. Reach out to people, to different people in the organization. You have questions, ask the people close to you and let them link you to those people, because it's really, I mean, it could be awkward to randomly send a message. We use Microsoft Teams, so send a Teams message to somebody in a whole different part of the organization, somebody you don't know at all. But if you say that, oh, I spoke to Sally and she told me that you would be the person to ask about this. And then all of a sudden you now have an inroad. You have like a letter of introduction to that person. It's not awkward at all. You can also ask your colleagues, how do we do things here? Is it appropriate to actually, Stephen, you just asked me the other day, is it if you want to set up a meeting with people, do you talk to their supervisor first or do you talk to them individually? How do we do that? So all these kind of questions, you just ask different kind of questions when it comes to working remotely. But otherwise, people are people. So, if we're all working at doing the same thing, towards some kind of project, we're all working on a project, then you're naturally going to be interacting with a whole lot of different people. Now, you also maybe want to get into meetings a little bit early, and different organizations, different departments, different units do this differently. But if you get into a meeting a little bit early, there will often be other people already there and they'll be chit-chatting about their weekend or whatever. And then you could kind of start picking up little things about who people are aside from their specific work functions. And, even if you're having one-on-one meetings with people, after you finished with the business end of your conversation, you might have some kind of personal conversation. And of course, it's just like we were talking about before, your boundaries are your boundaries. But this is how you get to kind of establish similar kind of water cooler conversations that you would when it comes to working in an actual office environment. Stephen, did you have other things to add there?
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, working from home is a transition. So it's good to recognize that this is new skill sets that you're developing, whether it's being on video, using different technology. So have some patience for yourself and know that it takes time to adjust, but know that the people you work with, they've all gone through that transition as well too. So I'm learning as every day as well too. We had another question, Oleg. It's a great
Sure.
question. Curious about what you suggest for someone who's about to work at a company and what's a team that used to be clients, but they'll now be coworkers. Is it okay to lean on those relationships, or should I play it cool and stay discreet as to not ruffle any feathers?
If I mean, if it's known that you guys know each other, I mean, you don't want to pretend like you don't know people who you've interacted with on and especially if you have positive relationships with people. I would say that it's, you don't want to side up and go, hey, client, or former client. But, so I would say it's somewhere in the middle. I mean, you don't ignore people. You know these people. You have some sort of connection with them. And that's fine to use. I mean, that's I would say is beneficial. Part of your work when it comes to, forming those relationships, where otherwise they would have been totally cold, has already been done. You know these people's names, kind of some of the things they like, maybe, kind of some of the work they do. So yeah, I think that's definitely good.
Thank you. Another great question. As a college student, I've never had a job except for one due to USource. I want to do a job search and currently searching both physically and online. But
Mhm.
online, I'm afraid of scam jobs, or they need a couple of experiences or need certain requirements that I don't have. How do I search for unexperienced jobs near me?
So you use the, reputable websites that Indeed.com, all there's so many different job sites. When you're trying to get an entry-level job, there's this popular meme where an entry-level job requires 10 years of experience. And of course, that's people are putting you in a really difficult situation. I would say that you should apply even if you've almost got the right experiences. And you could say in your cover letter, if it allows you to put a cover letter, you can explain who you are, and you can also see the kind of job that you're interested in and take classes on like LinkedIn Learning, Gale courses. There's a lot of free resources available online. And so particularly in technical roles, you can study up on the technologies or whatever the skills are that you don't possess currently, and so that you're not starting from, so you can say, I haven't had experience doing X, Y, and Z professionally, but I do have knowledge about it, and I will be able to, start doing that at the job. When it comes to scam jobs, the best piece of advice would be, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If they're saying, this entry level job, you start off you getting this, meager salary, but look, in a month, you're going to be making millions. That's a scam job. Yeah, that's not gonna happen. Or if they want you to do things that just seem really strange when it comes to interviewing, like if they want you to like pay for an interview, or if they want you to do a whole bunch of work before you actually get a job offer. Sometimes there are organizations that will, as part of their interview process, they'll have you do some kind of test, some sort of assessment of your job. But if they want you to do like a whole, like if you're applying for a marketing assistant job and they want you to create a whole marketing campaign, before they want to hear your ideas before they even offer you a job, that's something that you might want to think about, because they're just wanting, they may just be wanting free work, and they're going to ghost you once you've turned that stuff in. So just be careful, in the sense of, if something seems weird, if something is kind of being a little bit triggering, if something is raising red flags for you, back up and, think about it, or ask somebody else. Does this seem weird to you when what they're asking me to do?
And Oleg, do we have library resources that can assist with filling out applications or creating cover letters?
So we have a lot of information about cover letters, in the sense like we have books about cover letters which have templates which teach you how to do it. So yeah, we definitely have a lot of resources on that. We have a resource called BrainFuse Job Now, which is also available if you go to lacounty.library.org/learn. You'll see BrainFuse Job Now. And there's actually a resume review. So where an AI and an actual person will review your resume and get back to you about what you can improve on it. I don't know of a resource that can actually help you fill out the application, because a lot of applications is, it's your basic personal information, and at a library there's two issues. One, we don't really want to we don't want to violate your privacy by starting to fill out your personal information. And the other thing is that library staff, librarians may not have the time to sit, where it might take an hour to fill out a job application. They might not have time to just sit with one person to do that. So I would say the best resources would be BrainFuse Job Now, and then all of the various, we have so many books on resumes, cover letters, all of the different documentation and interviews, and all the different parts of the job search process.
Great, thank you, Oleg. Couple questions here about kind of touching on that toxic work environment you mentioned.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any tips for how to handle like a mean colleague when you get along with someone and you're non-confrontational? So you don't want to cause drama and you're non-confrontational, but if you have, difficult people in your organization.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what they're doing and what's happening. I would say, the idea of somebody being non-confrontational it's interesting to me, because I feel like almost everybody is non-confrontational. I mean, nobody, very few, there are some people who love the confrontation. They love that stuff. They love to be in your face and do it. But that's like really very few people. Most people don't really like confrontation, where they're going to be making somebody uncomfortable, where they're going to be uncomfortable. That's normal. Not wanting to be mean to somebody or appear mean to somebody. That's really normal. I would say depending on how closely related your work is. I mean, if it's a remote environment, it's pretty easy to not to be chatting with somebody, or don't respond to their petty chats. But if you're in a professional environment, you separate yourself, be somewhere else, excuse yourself if you have to. If it starts getting really toxic, like if people start being straight up mean, or it starts getting in the way of your work, those are situations where it's probably time to escalate. If you have a supervisor who's supportive, talk to your supervisor and just be factual about this. It's not like they're making me feel bad, but look, I'm trying to do my work and they're interrupting my work. What they're doing is getting in the way of what this organization's about. And if that's not going to help, then that's a situation where you probably want to go see HR. That's where your person in HR is going to be helpful. Where then they're gonna start to evaluate whether what these people are doing, and it might not just be you. That's the thing. If somebody is really rude and mean and causing a bunch of trouble in the workforce, there's probably other colleagues who are being disturbed by that. So if you go to HR, they might start to do an investigation depending on what's happening there, and then it's out of your hands, and they're going to be handling it.
Great, thank you, Oleg.
These are of course ideal situations. In some situations, supervisors are not helpful, HR is not helpful. Then you decide whether you want to stick it out or not.
Yeah, we have a couple other questions kind
Sure.
of related to that, like managing
Mhm,
relationships with people that may not be our biggest fan or may not be a
mhm,
fan of you getting the job. Um, I would sort of speak from my experience. It's impossible to really control how another person behaves, but also it's really hard to control impossible to control how somebody feels or their state of mind. You can only really control your own reaction to their behavior. So with that in mind, I feel like in a new workplace, it's really best to focus on why you're there and then do your best. And wherever other people are at, that's something that they're going through as well too. So
yeah, if you act in good faith and you act in a courteous, kind, civil way, you got yourself covered. You're doing the right thing. Just like you said, Stephen, you can't force other people to like you or want to have you. You have no uh control over whether who they want to be hired. Maybe they wanted their friend to be hired and they weren't. Well, that's not your fault. And they're irrationally blaming you for it. And that's on them.
right. Thank you, Oleg. One question here for applications. It's a little bit more detailed. Due to a lot of identity theft, how do I protect or know when it will be safe to include my social security number on a job application?
Mhm. That's a great question. I don't have a very great. Do you have an answer for that, Stephen?
I would say usually they do a background check on an applicant when they get to a later stage in the application. So for most job applications, I think it's okay to start in the beginning without including a social security number. And as you get further along in the application process, then when they actually are going to do a background check on you, that is a more appropriate time for them to ask you for your social security number. So if you're finding job openings just online and you are a little bit hesitant, I think it's perfectly safe not to include it in the beginning. And if they are interested, they will reach out and ask you for that personal information again. So you can be a bit wary on that, I would say.
Yeah, and when it comes to scams and just considering companies that seem like they're shady, it's always a good idea if you're starting, especially if you're starting to get, if you're starting to get bites, like you're thinking about filling out an application and you've never heard of this company, and you look at for their website and they don't have a website, or they have a website but it's really weird, or it looks really old, or it's not very good, or it's resolving to something that's their URL is resolving to something else, or there's mismatched information, misspellings, all sorts of stuff like that. The kind of stuff that you tend to find in phishing emails, the kind of stuff that you tend to find in email scams. Uh, that's stuff that should give you pause. If you're trying to find who the CEO is and it's like impossible to find, or what this
Mhm.
company does and it's impossible to find. They're not on LinkedIn, they're not on any social media. Not all companies are, but that's something that should get you thinking about whether this company is a legit organization. You can't find any of their work product. They're not heard of. You don't ever heard of them in a certain industry. They're not in any kind of directories. It's something stuff to think about. So kind of research to do.
Great. Thank you. Let's see here. couple more resume questions, which I
Mhm.
believe you covered. Um, we're getting to the top of the hour, so this might be a little topical. How do you politely cut a conversation short when you're in a rush at work? And sort of related to that on a virtual perspective, how do you tactfully exit like a toxic bad meeting on a Zoom call?
Ooh, yeah, that's a great question. Now I have time. I mean, I'm not gonna, we're not, if we still got
Hmm.
questions, I'm not in a hurry to leave. So, we're trying to get as many questions as possible. But I'm sorry, Stephen, I really have to go. I have something that I have to finish. Can I just I'm just kidding. But no, that's how. If I'm really sorry, but I have to get back to work. Uh, where it's not like I need you to stop talking. You're irritating me. You've been talking for 10 minutes. I don't care what you're talking about. No, I mean it's like, I'm sorry, I really have to go. I have to finish. Oh, I'm just finishing my lunch break. That's just the, politely excuse yourself. If the person is not, I mean, some people don't, some of you like you're looking at your watch, you're kind of backing away. Not everybody takes the hint. I'm one of those people, I just talk as you can experience, I kind of just talk. So, if somebody says, oh, I'm sorry, I really got to go. Cool. Okay. Bye. I think it's the same with the digital chat. You just, if somebody keeps chatting with you and you've got work to do and their chat is disturbing you, you've got a few options. One is just to do the same thing. I'm sorry, I can't chat right now. I have to finish something. Or as a nuclear option, you can mute their chat and then you won't get notifications, but then they'll see, oh, you're not responding. Means maybe you're away from the computer or something, and then they'll kind of back up. And if they continue chatting with you, they persist in just trying to chat with you about things that aren't work related, you might have to talk to your supervisor and that person might have to help to resolve that. If you can't tell them, if you're not comfortable telling them directly, hey, listen, you keep chatting with me, but I really have to, like, I can't chat all the time.
Great. Oh, here's a good one. Why is there a 3 months probationary period, and what could the employer do differently within that time frame? Sometimes it's 3 months, sometimes it's longer than that, employer or employee. Any thoughts on that?
Sometimes it's a year.
Hmm.
uh, I think probationary periods have pluses and minuses for both the employee and the organization. As far as how long they are, even if a probationary period is a year, it may not be enough to see whether a person is a good fit in an organization. Sorry. Things change, and so something in a person's life might change, and they all of a sudden might their performance might take a nosedive for potentially good reasons, potentially legitimate reasons. Um, so the question was, what can an employer do differently in the organization in a probation?
Yeah, the question was employer, but I think we
Yeah,
could mean employee as well too, right?
yeah. So a probationary period is a trial period. So theoretically, the idea is that you're going to be doing your job for that period. You're going to be evaluated more closely than you would be later. So for an employee, I mean, you just want to you want to check and understand, discuss with your supervisor specifically what the probationary period is for, what you're being evaluated against. There's usually some sort of, if it's a written evaluation that comes at various intervals, what are they going to be looking at?
Mm.
And and then discuss with your supervisor if you have questions about how you can fit into those categories. What can you do to fit in those categories, and just be clear in your mind what you're doing, uh, how that fits, and then be in regular communication with your supervisor about any feedback they need to give you so that you can succeed and pass those probationary periods with flying colors.
Right. Another question. What advice would you give someone fresh out of college and working in a professional field that no one knows I work in? I'm the first in my family to pursue a professional career. So how can I get more comfortable asking questions even when I think they're dumb questions? I think this speaks a little bit to imposter syndrome, especially
Yes.
for someone who's a first generation college student
Mhm.
or first generation in the professional field.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's exactly right. I would say that sometimes HR departments will have mentorship opportunities, but even if they don't, it's often possible through professional organizations or within a workplace to develop informal mentorships. And that way you can always ask somebody who you feel more comfortable with questions that you might not feel comfortable asking with, putting yourself on blast or on the spot, right in the organization, where, like you don't want people to know that you don't understand this. You can ask somebody else who's outside of the organization who's going to be like, okay, it's cool. We've all had this issue. We've all at some point not understood this. So yeah, seeking mentorship, even informal mentorship, is helpful. But even in your own organization, as you meet people, you're gonna come in contact with people who it just seems like they're friendly. It seems like they're open, and they're not going to look askance at somebody who's new at something and has totally normal questions. And we're talking about dumb questions, but oftentimes what one perceives as a dumb question is just a question that literally everybody has, and they just phrase it differently.
Yeah, I would add, Oleg, like you were mentioning, it takes time to learn a culture in a new workplace. So it's very normal to be feeling that way, but also just understand that it will take time and patience on your part to, learn comfortable, just like you will be if you're starting a new school or you move to a new town. It just takes
Mhm.
some time.
Yeah, and there's also resources like online, like there's like the Ask a Manager blog, which is a really fantastic blog, which is a Q&A essentially with a person who's, I think she was a former HR manager or something like that, and she's been doing the blog for a long time, and there's just questions about the workforce, and she gives responses about like the appropriate way to handle some of these things. So blogs like that are a really nice way uh, to read, and then you read the comments and see like, what is the normal way that this is done in these kind of workplaces, and particularly office workplaces in that situation. But, every industry has literature like that, or blogs like that, books, things like that.
Thanks, Oleg. I think that covers most of the questions we've received so far. We have a
Let me see.
other.
There's a question. I was unable to see the boss relations part. What was one of the main things
Oh
you
yeah.
emphasized to do or don't with your supervisor?
Hmm.
Uh, I can bring up that slide again. That's not a problem at all. Let me launch that slide. I can just show it to you. And then for the folks who are still here, who want a quick review, totally fine. Really quickly, interacting with your boss, note where they are on the spectrum of being a micromanager and being really freeform in terms of how much control they want. Consider their communication preferences. How do they want you to communicate to them? Email, knock on their door, uh, instant message. When do they want you to communicate with them when it comes to having questions and feedback? What do they care about? Do they want a certain report at 5 o'clock on every Friday? Or do they really care that you arrive exactly on time and you take your breaks exactly from this time to this time? Learn the formal and informal hierarchy. The formal hierarchy is the regular command chart. Informal hierarchy is the actual people in the organization who have the background knowledge and have the skills and who are in charge of certain projects. Those are the people you would actually ask about these things. That's what it takes really a while to learn. And of course, to remain open, which means that you just sometimes the things that you learn in the beginning change with your boss, with your colleagues, and you want to remain open to those things changing. So initially, your boss may say, I want you to do it this way. And then after you've worked together for 6 months, then you may realize, and they may realize that actually it's fine if you just email them or instant message them.
Yeah,
That was like a, yeah, go
oh,
ahead. That's
I
Steven.
would add to that, Oleg, at the same time, your boss is also learning about you and how you communicate and what your style is too. So ideally, a supportive boss would also be, adjusting their style to what works best for you as well too.
We had a question I saw the question, what advice for sales to customer interactions? That's a great question, but I don't know because I've never been in sales. I know it's not specifically relevant to this program, but I wanted to just shout out that, it's a good question. How do you excel quickly in sales? That's a fantastic question. We have a lot of books and resources about sales within the library, both on LinkedIn Learning, Gale courses, they're training on sales and the various aspects of sales, stages of sales and everything. And also we have a ton of book on sales. So I would say go to those sources. I could talk to you about sales, but what I have to say about sales is really not important because I have zero experience with sales. Okay. Do we have any other questions around? Are we good? I appreciate all the people that were here. These are really great questions, and thanks
Yeah.
for hosting, Stephen. I appreciate you lobbing these questions to me. And
This is great. I'm learning a lot. Everything I'm learning here, I'm going to apply right away, and I have been applying. But yeah, it is a process. I recognize that it is a process, and I think that's one of the hardest part. Because when you start a new job, you want to do well, you want to contribute, you want people to like you. But when you start, there is that transition period where it does take time for you to learn the culture and to see, where you can help and how you can contribute. And we all go through it. We all go through it, and one thing to keep in mind is after you go through it and when the next new person starts, then you can kind of help them and mentor them because you know what that was like as well
that's a
too.
really good point. Yeah, you just you know where the pain points are, maybe better than some of the people who have been part of the organizations for a really long time. Maybe they don't remember how it is, but you just did it. So you definitely do. Speaking of questions and pain points and feedback, we have a post-event survey that I would really appreciate if the folks out there who are still with us are able to fill out. I put this into the chat after every Work Ready event and really read these surveys. And your feedback is greatly appreciated. So it's a really short survey. It's going to take you like 2 minutes to fill out. I just put it in the chat. So if you click on that, give us your opinion, whether you enjoy the program, you didn't enjoy the program, other programs, topics that we could cover in the future. We have cover letters coming up at the end of this month because so many people in the survey mentioned that they really would like programs about cover letters. So what you put into that survey really does matter. We really do read them. So really appreciate it if you fill out the survey. And Steve, I'm good. I'm glad we answered all these questions. And yeah, if you want to take us out.
Great. Thank you, Oleg, and thank you everyone for attending. And we look forward to seeing you again, either virtually or in person at our library locations. All right, good luck, everyone. Stay dry. Bye.